guest, Jean-Pierre. We are here today to have a wonderful lecture by Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, an outstanding European mathematician, but also a great science administrator. We know each other a little bit more than 10 years. A little bit peculiarly, I was at the ERC Council, so I was in the process of selecting him or deciding him as a president. And as you can see, that was a great choice. He was a really excellent choice. So during his years in office at the European Research Council, he masterminded to initiate several crucially important programs. One of them is proof of concept. The idea of which is to take the scientific breakthroughs one step further for the application, to build the bridge over the so-called troubled waters. Although it was hotly debated, it was finally accepted and it turned out to be a success. And Jean-Pierre's role in that success was very, very big. The other very interesting instrument has been the synergy grants, which also in the beginning was met by the quite strong skepticism of the Scientific Council. I also remember the hot debates. There was a fear that it will copy the framework programs. But eventually, I think largely thanks to Jean-Pierre, we were able to convince our colleagues that this is not true, because this was a bottom-up. The scientist proposed a topic, not the other way around. And, ERC remains to be the driving force of the excellence of science in Europe. And as we have seen from the proof of concept, it has been also a very important motor in applications. So Jean-Pierre is a mathematician. He got his engineering degree in the École Polytechnique. He later also taught there for many, many years, and then spent most of his career as a mathematician at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, not far from Paris in... first in École Polytechnique. Well, he has had many international duties as president of the Mathematical Society, etc., and he has received several very prominent international prizes, the Paul Langevin Prize among them. So I have had the privilege to work under him for 3 years. I learned a lot, and I'm very happy to host you here at the Estonian Academy of Science. You are very welcome to give your lecture. Thank you.
First, good afternoon, everyone. First, let me express my gratitude to President Mart Saarma for his invitation to Estonia, to extend a trip to the north of Europe by visiting this beautiful country, especially its Academy of Sciences, making it possible for me to address you today. He was one of the excellent ERC vice presidents who helped me a lot when I was in charge. Today, I would like to discuss how a few breaking points in the history of science happen, transforming it in depth, and how today we may be confronted with a new dimension of the transformation of science because of the new developments connected to artificial intelligence. Of great interest to me is how some prominent figures in the scientific community reacted when confronted with breakthroughs, and how today the challenges associated with AI are being approached by some scientists. Although this discussion has a philosophical bearing and can be theorized, I will work from examples. Before coming to my examples, let me mention that I look at these issues with 3 points in focus: the time needed to assimilate disruptions and to have them impact technologies. Through them, many more people in the society are involved and affected. Second point, more specifically, the role played by technologies and instruments to typically allow access to new scales, some much larger and some much smaller, essential to expand our knowledge to new territories one can then explore. Finally, and today this has become absolutely crucial, raise the question on how one can make the fantastic adventure science is and the method on which it is based appreciated by a wide public. My hope is that if we are more successful on the last point, in the end, a broad cross-section of society recognizes that without understanding how the scientific enterprise works, society will not be able to meet some of the challenges it faces today. We know some are formidable and require a long-term and sustained action based on the most advanced knowledge. But in present times, it is also evident that some people try to present the knowledge produced by scientists as toxic and develop means to make the messages by scientists impossible to hear. For such a discussion, a historical perspective appears to me as essential, and this is the point of view I've taken today. Let me start with the extraordinary contribution made by Isaac Newton in his Principia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, published in 1687. In it, he gives a solid foundation to the differential calculus, states the fundamental law of mechanics, and develops a theory of gravitation that was modified only in 1915 by Einstein's theory of general relativity. Newton's chef-d'œuvre led to a solid theory explaining the motions of the planet in the solar system, but more importantly, offering a completely new basis for the development of industry by giving a scientific basis for engineering, with an impact for the society at large. Still, we should remember that Newton was also an alchemist. Let me jump at least a century ahead and consider the development of the calculus of variations in the hands of several people, among them Leonhard Euler and Joseph-Louis de Lagrange, can be certainly singled out. A famous puzzle has been the search for the brachistochrone curve, namely the curve allowing the fastest descent of a ball rolling on it under the effect of gravity. Indeed, the calculus of variations aims to characterize mathematical objects such as curves, surfaces, more generally functions or fields in the physicist's sense, which satisfy variational conditions. This means that these objects should extremize a function defined in the space of objects competing with them, such that their length, their area, their volume, their shape, etc. Today, the story of the subject continues to attract the attention of many, not only mathematicians, of course, but also other scientists, economists, and engineers who need to optimize some of the objects they are concerned with. As a mathematical field, the calculus of variations has maintained a close relationship with two parts of mathematics, analysis and geometry. What is of concern to us today is the fact that the progress it inspired has touched the foundations of mathematics as well as the elaboration of new methods. It remains a source of problems of great interest and nourishes very active branches of the theory of partial differential equations, numerical approximations, and optimal control and transport. For the calculus of variation, the turning point occurred in the late 18th century with the firm establishment of the so-called Euler-Lagrange equations that govern extremal objects. Soon, Lagrange himself, but later in the early part of the 19th century, Sir William Rowan Hamilton, brought these equations to a new level of generality that remains with us today. In view of the multiplicity of situations in which they are used successfully, it is interesting to recall the judgment on this subject of the great mathematician Felix Klein. In his comprehensive presentation of the development of mathematics in the 19th century, he says, I'm quoting, "Despite the undoubted beauty of this field, calculus of variation, however, I would caution the reader. In reality, physicists can extract only very little from these theories for use in their own work, and engineers almost nothing. They constitute a kind of scheme with empty spaces, which only takes on meaning when the gaps are filled from the varied world of natural phenomena." End of quote. In the edition in English of these lectures by Felix Klein, Richard Courant and Otto Eduard Neugebauer, published in 1926, they inserted the following footnote, quote, "We have retained these remarks, which are refuted in recent developments, because they are an example of a phenomenon often evoked by Klein himself, namely that mathematical theories, which may seem completely pure, can turn out to be extremely relevant in other sciences." End of quote. This historical reference, in which its actors are among the most eminent mathematicians, emphasizes the great difficulty involved in judging a priori of the applicability of a mathematical result. Today, the Euler-Lagrange equations form the conceptual framework for all studies based on energy methods of the mechanics of systems defined by a finite number of parameters. The dual method related to Hamilton equation are now used in practice in numerous questions of automation, especially in problems arising in spatial engineering and in econometrics. They also serve as the point of departure for quantum mechanics, which cannot be developed starting from the Newtonian view of mechanics. This was precisely what Courant and Neugebauer were referring to when they spoke about the recent development, 1926. We now turn to this new physics. In the late 19th century, the initial motivation to look for a new theory for physics was the need to reconcile the measured emissions of a radiating black body with the existence theory, a very theoretical issue. This led to an extraordinary journey, ending with the birth of a new physics pertinent at small scales or at high energies. Here are some key dates in this extraordinary itinerary, each one representing a key step forward. 1900, Max Planck. 1905, Albert Einstein. 1913, Planck and others. 1925, Werner Heisenberg. 1928, Paul-Adrien Maurice Dirac, and many more. This shows that after lifting a corner of the veil, it took significant time to embrace all the consequences of the initial step forward, as they required to revisit almost all basic points of previous theories, some even at a very philosophical level. I want to recall here a very good example showing that even at the highest level of science, accepting revolutions is not at all obvious. On 12th of June 1913, the Prussian Academy of Sciences issued a statement offering a position in Berlin to Albert Einstein. Of course, the basis for the appointment was the extraordinary contributions he had made earlier in the century, in particular in the year 1905, with 4 publications that revolutionized science: the introduction of the theory of special relativity, the use of Brownian motion to do physics, an explanation of the photoelectric effect and the relation of mass to energy, the famous E=mc² equation. In one of them, Einstein proposed that light might have a quantum nature to explain the photoelectric effect. Here is what the statement of the Prussian Academy, 1913, says, translated into English. The fact that Einstein occasionally overshot, for example, in his hypothesis of like quanta, should not held too hard against him. And then the four signatories of this statement were Max Planck, Walter Nernst, Heinrich Rubens, and Emil Warburg, the first two Nobel Prize winners. Note that this explicit doubt was put in writing 8 years after Einstein's publication. But then it is critical to mention that the previous sentence continues as follows. Because, I'm quoting, because without taking a risk, no real innovation can be introduced, even in the most exact natural sciences, end of quote. This shows how, for knowledge to progress, it is essential to permanently keep an open mind. Bringing up new ideas that challenge beliefs creates resistance, not only from religious authorities, as we saw a number of times in history, or from the public at large, repeatedly, but also from the scientific community itself, even among its most prominent members. Such a fact must always be kept in mind. This is why it is so important to encourage researchers to take risks while being guided by their curiosity and to accompany them in their endeavors. The punchline of the Berlin statement is that Einstein received the Nobel Prize in 1921. I'm quoting the Nobel quote, for his explanation of the photoelectric effect. He never got the Nobel Prize for general relativity. With Einstein, I could, of course, continue with his use, accompanied by Marcel Grossman and David Hilbert, of the calculus of variations applied to the scalar curvature to get the field equations of general relativity, the so-called Einstein equations. The concept of intrinsic curvature was first identified for surfaces by Carl Friedrich Gauss at the turn of the 19th century, then widely generalized to any dimension as the curvature tensor by Bernhard Riemann in his 1854 Habilitationsdefense. It took 50 years to Gregorio Ricci Corbastro to extract from the curvature tensor, from the Riemann curvature tensor, the Ricci curvature part, which lies at the heart of the Einstein equation, but also at the heart of the recent theory of optimal transport. Another interesting example, because it is based on a different pattern of interactions between disciplines, here mathematics and physics, is the introduction of spinors as mathematical objects. They were identified for the first time in 1913 by Élie Cartan, doing a systematic classification of what mathematicians call representation of the orthogonal Lie algebra. They were introduced in physics by Paul-Adrien Maurice Dirac in 1928 in his effort to provide a basic quantum equation compatible with special relativity. This step led to the recognition that some particles, the fermions, are represented by spinor fields and not merely by functions, the traditional wave functions of quantum mechanics. Spinor fields satisfy the Pauli exclusion principle, which has become the basis of understanding the periodic table of elements and many chemical processes. Today, now that we have won access to much smaller scales, thanks to major technological progress, these two revolutions are completely absorbed by the engineering world because of the role they play in the design and the control of new materials and a number of processes at very small scales. When initially quantum mechanics was an intellectual challenge for the happy few, it has now become the bread and butter of engineers dealing with many different phenomena connected to the first quantum revolution. Thanks to it, one could go much deeper into the structure of matter, explaining its properties, but also its interaction with light leading to understanding exotic properties such as superfluidity or superconductivity. This allowed the invention of new devices such as lasers, transistors, leading to massively integrated circuits that lie at the heart of many tools we use daily, such as smartphones. It made possible the transition of our society to an information and communication society we are living through, with all the challenges which accompany such a development. This is not the end of the story, since a second quantum revolution is underway. It has to do with the manipulation and control of single intramicroscopic objects, such as a single particle or a single photon. Initially, this, of course, relied on having access to very sophisticated equipment, but the dream of some physicists is to make the exceptional normal, as it happened with the transistors, now present in billions of copies in the chips we all use. Beyond the purely experimental prose lies the possibility of a quantum cryptography or the quantum generation of random numbers. Indeed, nobody knows for sure what a quantum computer will be, and most importantly, will be able to do. At the root, but also as a puzzle, lies the concept of entanglement. What does it mean, really? How can one achieve it in a truly controlled way? We already see appear individual quantum objects. Again, some key questions according to Alain Aspect, a Nobel Prize winner for a breakthrough in this domain. I'm quoting Alain. What will be the time lag between the understanding of the basic phenomena and their translation into devices with a widespread use? Will it be in computing, in simulation, in communication, or in sensing? End of quote. So much for physics. Let me now move to another major scientific revolution, the discovery of the DNA and of its structure. It changed radically the view one has of the living world and to evolution. Here again, some key dates. 1869, Friedrich Miescher identifies the DNA. 1919, Fergus Levine relates the DNA to genetic information. 1952, Rosalind Franklin gets a diffraction picture produced by DNA. 1953, Francis Crick and James Watson propose the double helix structure for the DNA. The period 1988-2003 sees a world mobilization costing billions of dollars, which succeeds in deciphering the human genome while managing to keep it a public resource when some wanted it to privatize it. Today, molecular biology, the child of this fantastic adventure, is dominating this area of science and has transformed and continued to transform medicine quite radically. The four letters A, C, G, and T, leading the names of the four amino acids constituting DNA, namely adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, have become the new alphabet of world use. With this background, I want to present two stories connected to this transformation, where the distance between the discovery and its impact for a large part of society has been much shorter than in previous examples. Molecular scissors is one of them, whose scientific name is CRISPR-Cas9, and mRNA vaccines. I begin with the CRISPR-Cas9 adventure, which doesn't span millennia like the previous one, but only a few decades. The key dates are 1987, at the moment where a group of Japanese researchers working on Escherichia coli, 1993, Francisco Juan Mojica, 2012, Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna, 2013, Zhang Feng. The starting point of the molecular scissors story is the discovery by a group of Japanese researchers in 1987 of the presence of repeated DNA structures in Escherichia coli. They failed to understand the phenomenon, and in the 1990s, other researchers took on the task of characterizing these structures. We can cite in particular Francisco Mojica, a researcher from the University of Alicante in Spain. His first publication on this subject dates back to 1993. He is the one who later gave the name CRISPR to these repeated sequences. It was in 2012 that Emmanuel Charpentier, then a researcher at the University of Umeå in Sweden, and Jennifer Doudna, professor at the University of Berkeley, published an article in Science where they show how during a second infection of a bacteria by a virus, thanks to access to the copy of the viral genetic information stored in the CRISPR sequences, the Cas9 protein will cut the viral DNA and thus render it inoperative. They show that the two components of RNA CRISPR can be incorporated into a guide RNA that brings the Cas9 nucleus to a specific DNA target, making the action easier. In 2013, Zhang Feng at MIT was the first to successfully do targeted DNA editing in a mammalian system using CRISPR-Cas9. Understanding the mode of action of these molecular scissors at work at the bacterial level has paved the way for an entirely new approach to genome editing. It makes it possible to remove or add DNA at specific locations with an unprecedented precision. The speed with which this technology has spread to many labs around the world is simply breathtaking. For this discovery and their subsequent work, Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna received the 2020 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Asked what led her to take an interest in this question, Jennifer Doudna said, I'm quoting, "I found the chemistry at the basis of this process cool," end of quote. Emphasizing that curiosity had been her main driver when she became interested in the process. She just wanted to understand. This doesn't mean at all that this great story is not without challenges, the major one being, of course, the ethical use of this technique. Let me now move to the exhilarating story of mRNA vaccines. Again, some key dates. 1989, Kathleen Carico, 1990s attempts of a vaccine use. 2008, the company BioNTech is founded in Mainz, Germany. 2010, the company Moderna is founded in Cambridge, Massachusetts. 2020, both companies produce mRNA vaccines against COVID-19 in a few months. Indeed, the revolution of molecular biology is not just about understanding the structure and role of DNA or mRNA, but also how the proteins that allow cells to function are made. This is particularly the role of RNA, ribonucleic acid, deduced from DNA, in particular in its messenger version, mRNA. RNA is also made up of four nucleotides A, C, G, and U, since in it, T, the thymine, is replaced by uriacil. RNA is fragile, and in order to use it in a vaccine, one faces two issues. First, to use it to attack a virus, one needs to bring it to the right cell without having it destroyed. And second, to anticipate and identify possible immune reactions to its presence in a cell. Without long-term investment in the understanding of the function of mRNA, the development of mRNA vaccine against COVID-19 in just a few months, for sure a record time, would have just not been possible. The impact they had in reducing massively the death toll of the disease at world scale is an amazing success of the curiosity-driven research and of the financial and industrial mobilization that allowed the production of billions of doses also in a record time. Still, without the first component, nothing would have happened. This gives an irrefutable proof that without a deeper understanding of key processes affecting humans in their lives, major threats cannot be dealt with properly. The fact that I took all my examples in mathematics and natural sciences just reflect the fact that these are disciplines of which I have a reasonably solid knowledge. One can find equally pertinent examples of the resistance to change I try to highlight also in the social sciences and humanities. It is time for me to turn to the present, in particular to discuss the new role that data play. They will for sure play an even bigger role in the future in scientific and societal developments. It will be the focus of the second part of my speech, dealing with the new challenges to science and scientists coming from artificial intelligence, AI, for the rest of the talk. My purpose is to show that this new frontier has a number of sides which require to be dealt with properly, a not so easy task. This most likely will lead to changes in science which are difficult to anticipate, but it is already clear that they will be massive. My belief is that AI will change radically how a number of disciplines have to organize their research. The collection, the analysis, and the confirmation of data, information becoming an essential part of the activity related to them, a large part being computer-assisted. Of course, all this is only possible because the computing power has increased dramatically, the result of remarkable technological progress, and simultaneously its cost diminished at a similar rate. Let me start by dealing with a specific domain where the collection of data all over the globe has been essential. Indeed, without the patient and systematic work done over a number of years by the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, it would not have been possible to produce documented evidence of the climate change the Earth is undergoing and the role that human societies play in this process. The IPCC combined the knowledge produced by many experts from many different disciplines. The remarkable methodological procedure put in place did not discourage, though, climato-skeptics of all kinds to deny facts that IPCC established in many different forms. In spite of the most recent developments and repetition of bad news on climate change, the worst being probably projections about the rise of the ocean's level, their capacity of the climato-skeptic to delay awareness of the urgency to take adequate measures has not diminished. The present US president even declared climate change a joke. For sure, a strategy guaranteeing that we'll miss the slight chance we have to avoid the worst developments on this front. Still, efforts to understand in depth the changes and their causes need to continue unabated, since the present models available don't give a full description of the various phenomena beyond the increase of the temperature that one witnessed. Again, understanding lies at the heart of a possible efficient action. Next, I of course need to talk about the new paradigm of AI. Based on accumulated data and powerful search engines using extensively sophisticated neural networks. This is a good moment to remind ourselves that AI had, in the last 40 years, two near collapses, as the paradigms it was based upon at the time proved to be unrealistic. The present one could too face crisis, the one already identified being its cost in energy in the context of a widespread use. The challenge posed by the new paradigm to both mathematicians and computer scientists, which is also a challenge to society as a whole, is that for the moment, we don't have at our disposal any real proof of why the algorithms AI is based upon turn out to be so efficient. Checked against many sorts of data, the high level of efficiency persists. Still, the scientific approach requires that this gap be bridged, and that this is as soon as possible in view of the widespread and accelerated use of AI affecting many aspects of society. The main difficulty concerning estimating how AI will impact the development of science is connected to the speed at which it is moving forward. This makes it hard to anticipate what it will be able to do in coming years, even in coming months, or even coming weeks, since so much has been achieved in such a short time. On this, a note entitled Claude's Cycle. Claude is one of the most efficient AI systems, reminding the role of Claude Shannon in information theory, published in March by Donald Knuth, a remarkable specialist in combinatorics and the creator of the tech software, is very revealing. Here is how it opens, how Knuth opens his note. Quote, shock, I learned yesterday that an open problem had been working on for several weeks has just been solved by Claude, Opus 4.6, Anthropic's hybrid reasoning model that had been released 3 weeks earlier. It seems that I'll have to revise my opinion about generative AI one of these days. What a joy is to learn not only that my conjecture had a nice solution, but also to celebrate this dramatic advance in automatic deduction and creating problem solving. He concludes the note, which is a few pages long, by saying, quote again, breaking news, the problem for even values of M is no longer in doubt. First, I heard again from a collaborator from Singapore, Ho Boon Swan, who exercised the newly released GPT 5.4 Pro using a very standard request. The result was a beautifully formatted and apparently flawless 14 pages paper containing the desired explanation and proof. Ho said this was entirely in the machine's doing. It didn't have to edit the paper in any way. And GPT 5.4 Pro's fascinating record of the entire interaction is available online. End of quote. Even the form AI might take is not yet clear, and therefore is not as easy to identify what sector of society might be the most affected by its use. It is expected that it will be broad, but how broad is still a very open question. The heart of the matter is whether it will be able to do a number of things completely automatically. To discuss that, I rely on a short essay by David Bessis, first a mathematician, then an entrepreneur, entitled The Fall of the Theorem Economy, with a subtitle, How AI Could Destroy Mathematics and Barely Touch It, published 2 weeks ago, in which he considers the possible impact of AI on mathematics. He starts by recalling a statement by the late William Thurston, a Fields medalist with incredible geometric insight. The quote from Thurston is, "The product of mathematics is clarity and understanding, not theorems by themselves." David Bessis recalls his own experience with proving theorems. Here's what he says about it. Quote, "If you think that a hard part of a mathematician's job is to prove theorems, let this serve as a counterexample. From the moment I conceived of theorem 05, one of his theorems, I knew it was true and that proving it would be straightforward. What was the hard part then? Conjecturing the exact statement and writing it down? Not even. In this example, this part was equally straightforward. The hard part was to intuit that there should be something like theorem 05 and to come up with a conceptual framework where it became easy to express. Once I got the definition right, the rest followed more or less organically." End of quote. What does this have to do with my discussion about AI? Simply that it is not clear whether AI will be able to come up with new concepts and the right definitions. The heart of mathematics, according to David Bessis. I've not yet touched directly the ethical aspects that the use of such tools have in the society at large. They are the more serious that the use of AI diminishes our capacity to be exposed to views that are discordant with ours, but also slowly our capacity to use serendipity. We know how much serendipity played a role in the shaping of a number of scientific discoveries. About this ethical dimension, I would like to quote Joshua Bengio, Canadian computer scientist based in Montreal. Here is an excerpt from a blog he published in 2023 entitled, AI Scientist, Safe and Useful AI? Question mark. And then here is the excerpt from his blog. I'm quoting, "I've been very vocal about the importance of accelerating regulation, both nationally and internationally, which I think could help us mitigate issues of discrimination, bias, fake news, disinformation, etc. The model for this solution is the idealized scientist focused on building an understanding of what is observed. also known as data in machine learning, and of theories that explains all the observations. Keep in mind that for almost any set of observations, there will remain some uncertainty about the theories that explain them, which is why an ideal scientist can entertain many possible theories that are compatible with the data. End of quote. Another aspect of AI has to do directly with the functioning of democratic societies. It concerns the way social media, governed by AI algorithms, tend to fragment society, hence making it less able to consider itself as a whole, at all levels, from small village communities to laboratories, from cities to regions, from regions to nations, from nations to continents, from continents to the whole world. From that point of view, one should note that reducing democracy to a voting process can only amplify such a phenomenon. Of course, real democracy is much more than that. More research onto its real functioning is actually needed to see new ways how to nurture it, as well as into a thorough follow-up of the propagation of toxic data, a critical research domain some scientists have started to dive into. The main lesson here is that we scientists must never give up our capacity to challenge established truths, but we know that we need to do that following the rules of the scientific method teaches us, namely transparency, reproducibility, access to confirmed sources, and a permanent confrontation with reality. A possible summary of my address today can be the following one. So that's my conclusion. Great revolutions in science are to unravel new territories in an effort to push the boundaries of knowledge, hence bringing our understanding to a new level. They are always met with great resistance and can succeed only if their promoters have a lot of persistence and follow thoroughly the scientific method. The challenge posed by AI today is of a new dimension because of its massive and comprehensive nature. Beyond the fact that its power changes almost by the day, in order to address it adequately, one is forced to take a sufficiently philosophical approach, reanalyzing what the very nature of science is and what understanding really means. Scientists must not shy away of this new responsibility in an environment which has become rather hostile, knowledge being presented as toxic by some who work hard at distorting facts. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. So the presentation is now open for questions. So I start with one. So what do you think? Will AI at some point be able to create new ideas, new concepts, better than the human brain?
Well, you've noticed I've been very careful in what I said about this because the landscape is changing so quickly that one never knows what to say. In particular, I mean, I quoted in particular Donald Knuth, who is definitely somebody who knows computer science thoroughly, and his change of mind, because he was really very impressed to have not only the problem solved, but that in the end one can produce a mathematical article purely from a question, not even with so the machine has found the solution, but has been able to write it up as an article which a mathematician, like he's quoting his colleague Ho from Singapore, has nothing to say against it. So it starts to be a bit problematic. Of course, this is still in the context of concepts which are well posed, and you pose a question and you don't ask the machine to create a new concept, just create a new path, a new proof, that's it. So now that leaves open the question you've set, and I must say I'm very careful because things have been changing so quickly and amazingly quickly. I have another example. Probably some of you know Laszlo Lovas from Hungary, who has been president of the Hungarian Academy, a member of the ERC Scientific Council. And he also told me a story which I find very interesting. I was exchanging with him about this question of AI, and he said when he was a student, he proved the theorem, which tried to publish, could never publish it. And then recently, he just remembered himself about this. And so he started to ask the question, not the statement, not even the statement, to various systems. And within 2 days, he had not only the solution, but actually the proof which was given was his proof, although he never published it, which is kind of interesting to see that, well, first of all, his proof was not so bad, and definitely it was a machine could retrieve it today without too much trouble. So it shows that really the landscape is changing quickly. Therefore, I'm very careful.
So Laszlo was proud of himself and the computer.
Yeah, no, in a sense, yes.
Andres.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Very fascinating lecture. Yeah, sorry. Thank you, very fascinating lecture. I feel a bit scared now, particularly what you said at the end. And my question is, what is a balance between the business interest and scientific interest? What defines the development of AI going forward?
Well, of course, you're posing a very fundamental question, which, well, two comments. I mean, two ways of approaching the question. One of them, which is a fact, which for me today is a real worry. Today, the private business is investing more in research on AI than the public sector. Massively. The difference is huge. And even for countries like China, which is investing very significant money. So in a sense, you run the risk that the people who are really going to govern the whole development are the people who are investing. And they are not only investing money, but they have very good minds with themselves. And at the moment, for many people who are working in this area, of course, salaries offered by all these companies have nothing to do with you can offer in universities in Estonia, or in France, or even in China. So this is the first danger. That is actually the unbalance between the business sector and the scientific sector is so much towards the business sector at the moment in terms of money and attracting great minds that it's, for me, really a problem. And of course, you know that behind it, there is another battle, which is the battle by some of these people from business to have totally no regulation and to block any kind of regulation. That's why I was quoting Benjo, because Joshua Benjo, because he's definitely one of the people who knows exactly what he's talking about, and he's really fighting to obtain that regulation to be in place. That's the first side. The second side is still, I'm not so sure. Very often, although some companies in the private sector, I know some people working for Google, for example, they are given some of their time is completely free. They can do what they want for typically 30% of their time, and without the company telling them anything. So for me, still, what makes the big difference is the capacity of humans to really come up with radically new ideas that nobody thought about, and like happened with Einstein and the photoelectric effect, which was judged by the scientific community as too much, but in the end, not only too much, but really fantastic progress. So that's where the question lies. That is whether still some scientists by their creativity, by their capacity of challenging and coming up with new visions and so on, can still be finally more powerful than systems which are still geared by a very definite, control of global systems and so on. But that's an open question, and unfortunately, I'm really worried because of what I said first, that is the unbalance which is being now in place.
Isn't it there also one very interesting component that, especially in AI, but also in the pharmaceutical industry, the companies are doing more and more also basic science.
I know, that's what I was saying, that they are.
Very interesting. Mark.
And thank you for your talk. You deliberately focused on fields such as mathematics and biomedicine and IT, but you mentioned also that still the relevance of humanities and social science is there. And I wanted to ask more specifically on this. For instance, in the case of climate change or AI, do you see any role, and if yes, what kind of role for humanities, social science, maybe also actually for arts and artistic research? Yeah.
Well, several things. One thing is, of course, the notion of revolution is probably not the same concept in social sciences and humanities as in, say, natural sciences. So that's one reason, in the context of the speech I prepared, I would have redefined what could be a revolution in social sciences and humanities, which I didn't want to do. My second comment has to do with a domain in which, of course, the new possibilities is fantastic, has to do with the study of languages. And you know now that basically on your telephone, if somebody speaks any language, you have a translation, and most of the time translation is not so bad. It's a good, but also it shows that on this type of activity is going to be very much affected because, of course, we are not so far away to a time where actually you can speak in one language, the person answers in a different language, and it's automatic. My daughter is a medical doctor, and she had a number of Ukrainian patients who were not speaking English. She speaks English and not speaking French. And she has been able to treat them just because on her phone she has a good Ukrainian translation. And of course, it could be any other language, just that she has been using it quite systematically with a number. Of course, now they are improving. They are starting to speak French. But of course, the beginning was critical that she could do that. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is also the new importance, I'm sure you're fully aware of this, of data in social sciences in general, but also in humanities. And the fact that one can recover information which before was completely inaccessible, sometimes with the use of physics. One of my very good friends is working in a region of the world where we have a number of data which are stored in in clay documents, which are sealed. But now with a laser, the proper laser, you can actually read that's cuneiform writing from inside the thing without breaking it. Because before that, you had this wonderful collection of letters. I mean, we are talking about 50,000 letters going back to 4,000 years. And now you can actually read them without breaking them, but that's physics which helps you. But then, of course, you discover that the variety of cuneiform languages, cuneiform writings, is even more than what we knew, and we knew already a lot. So, of course, this new era of access to data by all means, some physical, some computer-based access, is going to broaden the domain that needs to be explored. So it will change the field because it broadens the field, makes it, it gives you access to information you didn't have access to before.
Thank you very much. My name is Margit Sutrop. I am a professor for philosophy at Tartu University and also an MP here at the Parliament. But I have been also an evaluator for many ERC and European Commission funded projects. And I'm just curious, you were talking about scientific revolutions and how novel innovations, discoveries are made. But there are a lot of factors, and you demonstrated especially the Einstein story very well shows that sometimes people do not recognize what is exactly this new thing. Or there may be also some kind of personal conflicts, or people do not actually want this new knowledge to be recognized because they are envious, or there may be a lot of different factors there. So I'm curious just about your own reflection about funding of science. Science today is like a big system, a lot of different responsibilities, editors, reviewers, institutions. I mean, what is exactly the guarantee that we really recognize what actually is the new really new breakthrough knowledge, can we be sure, or do you think there are many Einsteins that have not been recognized, or many discoveries that have not really been realized even? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, you've seen that my point, one of the themes of my speech was definitely to stress how much, in general, the scientific community resists to changes and to new ideas. And I'm sure this results in what you say, namely that some new, very important new information or new path to follow are actually not stay under the table just because people feel refuse to accept them. So I'm sure this risk exists, and one of the reasons why I gave this speech was to say one has to keep in mind that the resistance to accepting new ideas is very, very strong. Still, how can one analyze such a situation and try to actually prevent this from happening? I think the only way is to insist on how important it is to be open-minded. And of course, you cannot avoid the fact that if there is a very strong group, very active group, very well-financed group, and so on, the probability that this group will be more heard than a group which is more smaller, less funded, and less publicized will be. So this challenge still exists. So inequalities in access to funding, in access to training the right people, and so on, is something which you cannot negate, and just by saying be open-minded, because actually part of it is also connected to power in a way which you have to keep as minimal, as small as possible, but it's impossible to erase it. So one has to be aware and then on our toes and try to really always keep an open mind.
Right.
Thank you for this interesting presentation. As we know, when the quantum mechanics was discovered, so there was a main misunderstanding between certainty and randomness. And I think that with the development of AI now, we are encountering another turn in this problem or issue or challenge of understanding scientific and interesting relationship between certainty and randomness, because both are needed. Both are needed. And for most of the people, it is becoming more and more difficult to understand the exact relationship between certainty and randomness.
I think you're correct. Of course, one of the difficulties with entanglement is, in particular, even just giving a precise definition of it is very, very difficult, because you have to, you have to describe the experimental conditions in a very specific way, in which you are not actually hiding without realizing that you are hiding some key conditions. And so I think, well, I'm not the expert on this, of course, because there are people, but it's definitely for this kind of activity, which of course is very critical to develop quantum computer, for example, because quantum computer will be using entanglement in some way, and therefore being able to separate randomness from uncertainty will be very important. So that's why people are very careful in saying when this will happen and what it will mean exactly and how you can define it precisely. But I think definitely some progress has been made from the way you can control all what you need to control to make sense of what you are doing. So I think that from that point of view, we are in a new era from that point of view, but probably not enough to get to the next stage, which is really to make it something you can use as you use transistors, for example, which is now completely under control.
We take a last question. Lauri.
Yes, hi, my name is Lauri Melksoo. I'm professor of international law at the University of Tartu here and was in the past also ERC grantee. I was interested in your historical interpretation of the history of science from Isaac Newton to Heisenberg and Einstein and nowadays AI. And I'm sure that you as a leader of the ERC, you kind of have thought about it, so my curiosity is, what do you think about it? Does the development of science have some sort of purpose or telos? Why are we doing this? Why do we want to know as much as we can, or do we want to perfect human lives? Or is there a telos or purpose to science, or is there some sort of chaos and just endless human curiosity?
Well, it depends whether you want a personal answer or just an answer of society altogether, because these are different scales. Of course, as a scientist, personally, for me, I'm convinced that without understanding things, you cannot actually come up with tools to deal with situations. And for sure, the society at large is presently confronted with a number of challenges. Some of them are, since you're a professor of international law, has to do with war and peace and things like this. But some others have to do with the global action of the human race over the globe and how it develops, how it changes the world, and how it what kind of resources we are as humans using, and therefore what one could witness in recent, say, 20 or 30 years is how much our understanding of some areas of natural sciences, for example, has progressed, but at the same time, I tend to quote mathematician I like a lot, which is to say that the 20th century has seen a lot of unreason lead to absolutely crazy situation for the world. And unfortunately, the 21st century looks like it's going to behave in the same way. That is to have a number of people who are pursuing some rational way of getting solutions, and some other part of the human race which is at the same time behaving irrationally and then leading to very conflictual situations. So that's why there is a difference between what, as a person, for example, what I'm interested in, and I feel that definitely the role of understanding is critical, and the society as a whole. And then, of course, comes the question, how, as a person, I can interfere with this evolution. For the moment, I feel a bit without capacity of having a true action, except calling attention of people, that I've tried tonight, to say that really one needs to put more attention to a certain number of things. But of course, it's up to people to decide whether they are willing to take this up or not. It's purely their decision. And I mean, as a scientist, I feel I have a duty, which is to contribute to understanding. And I contributed also by training students, of course. If you're a professor, you know how important it is to have students. But still, we are confronted with a global situation, which is, for me, very worrying, and particularly because now the new worry for me, which is something I didn't realize could happen, I could be confronted with this, is the fact now a number of people consider knowledge as toxic, and therefore that places producing knowledge are, like the statement of the Vice President of the United States saying that universities are my enemies. So that, for me, is difficult to take, because I never thought I would be confronted with such a statement. But these statements are made, and they are not random. I mean, they're just there. So, well, maybe I'm the part of the cause why he says that, so I have to understand why I'm the cause. And, because I feel if we don't understand the cause of things, we cannot treat them. That's my permanent motto. Thank you.
That is nothing new. In history, we know that there were armies who came and first burned down the libraries.
Sure, no,
So very last question, Your Excellency.
Mr. Professor, yes, a question you mentioned a lot, the international competition. It's very interesting for me as a diplomat. You mentioned also a lot AI. As a mathematician, I would be interested to know where we are as Europeans in mathematics and how important mathematics are for AI, for defining algorithms and mastering what we need to master in the future in terms of AI. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you know, AI is a combination of things. I mean, part of it is definitely there is some mathematics behind, but on the other hand, at the same time, to make it effective, you need machines. And of course, the machines are not cannot completely be separated from the rest. So in the case of Europe, I think the development of, although I quoted Don Cruz, who is American, David Bessis is a Frenchman, actually, so he's definitely European. I mentioned Joshua Benjo, who is from Canada. But I think Europe, from the point of view of mathematics and the mathematics used in AI, is definitely contributing significantly. And actually, a number of engineers in the companies which are actually leading in this thing are actually been trained in Europe, but a number of them actually moved typically to the US or to other places, or even to China, because some of them are going to China, even if they are not of Chinese descent. Because China at the moment is completely able to invite people and provide them with extremely good working conditions. Not only salary, but also extremely good students, which you know for a teacher what makes a difference in the quality of your students. And so from that point of view, I think Europe has a good basis. Still, if you look at now the investment which are made in Europe, both at European level but also at national level, we are not competitive. That's why for the next framework program, and I'm sure you read the Draghi report, it's an absolute must for Europe to invest more in science and technology. And whether this will happen in the end, we will know at the end of this year, more almost surely at European level. But if you look at the case of our own country, France, at the moment, it's just catastrophic. I mean, the budget for universities for this year is just a disaster. And how can we be in such a situation? I know the cause, because we have a big debt, and at some point we have to deal with the debt. But I think for Europe, in order to be able to play a role in the future, we need to address this lack of investment in science and technology, and which goes with it, of course, is the perspective we offer to the young next generation. And for the moment, I still talk to young people, and many of them don't see their future in academia because what they are offered doesn't make sense. I mean, so that's a big risk that actually the very best minds actually. It's very good that they go to private sector. I have nothing against it, but you keep a balance between the two, and at some point. People need to see some perspective in which they can develop their own life. I must say, I was in a very privileged situation. My generation, I was hired by CNRS, I was 21. So I could be in CNRS 44 years, which is fantastic. And of course, my salary was not very high, but my wife had also a job. She was a professional person. We could be parents at 23. But I see with my grandchildren, I have some grandchildren who are 28, none of them are parents. But I was a father, I was 23. And I was of course we are not rich, but we saw some kind of perspective, we had some stability and so on. So that's my worry about people, because in the end, what I really believe is what makes difference are people. We share this view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Jean-Pierre. We are now continuing with the panel, and Vice President of the Academy, Marek Tamm, is a moderator of the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So indeed, we will continue discussion that we already actually started, and please kindly invite all the panelists to find a chair. And in a way, we will move from the, let's say, research revolutions to research policy. And mostly we'll be focusing on European science and research. And I see that we still have to put microphone on Jean-Pierre. Well, that's complicated as well here. So let me say that, just to open this debate, that European science is often described through a paradox. That it is, on the one hand, excellent, diverse, internationally connected, and publicly supported. Yet, on the other hand, Europe is also often accused of being slow, fragmented, over-regulated, and less successful than, let's say, USA or China in turning discoveries into technological and economic power. So this could be background for our discussion, and I will maybe just very briefly introduce this panelists because I don't see any information of it. So let's say from my right hand, Lauri Mälksoo, Professor of International Law at University of Tartu, Mari Moora, Vice Rector for Research at University of Tartu, and Professor of Ecology.
Of Community.
Okay. Jean-Pierre Bourguignon was already introduced by Mart. Then we have Mart Toots from the Estonian Business and Innovation Agency, Katrin Kiisler from the Estonian Ministry of Education and Research, and then Mikk Vahtrus from the Estonian Ministry of Economics and Communication. So it's a very nice mixed panel, including academics and let's say, administrators in research policy. And just to kick off the discussion, I will ask everybody to answer very briefly to this question. If you had to name one major strength and one major weakness of European science today, what would they be? So maybe, Lauri, over to you.
Oh, I really chose my place really well here.
Yeah.
But okay, so it's a fair question. I think the strength is still the freedom of it, openness of it, because, you know, Marek, our generation, we still remember times when things were so much more constrained, and there are countries where things are so much more constrained. I'm still genuinely happy and satisfied with this kind of space of also different opinions, different approaches that exists in our society. It could always be argued what are the limits of it, but I think it's a value in itself that you know, you're not immediately imprisoned or something when you have a view that is maybe not the mainstream view, and that is really something important also about Europe. And
the weakness?
And the weakness, I think that, well, I mean, when scholars and scientists meet, we usually fall into this bubble that we start to complain about the money, about the resources. We say that, yeah, but you know, we don't have enough of it. But of course, we must then also fairly understand that other groups, when they are meeting in their bubbles, they are saying the same. I mean, the President was saying about the French budget is in crisis, so this crisis probably also affects firefighters. So this lack of money is not unique for us. But I still, in the end, it is also fair to express some of these grievances. I think that what you described, you know, makes very much sense. It's like, would I recommend today, in today's world, my kids to become scientists? I'm afraid, I'm not sure I would do that. And it's partly because, you know, there is, let's say if I would build up a company, I think this is also a very risky business. I know too little about it, but the kind of predictability is not so strong. If you're relying very heavily on grants, for example, how do I know whether I'm good enough in
in 4 years to get a grant, or I will end up as a middle-aged poor person. So that is still a structural weakness, but I don't see it going away.
So freedom and money, Mari.
Freedom and money. I would say that strength is a very long tradition of fundamental curiosity-driven science. And this is a very European strength. But we heard about that in this. Actually, most of these examples came from old Europe. And I think ERC, as it is now, and hopefully in the future, will be a strength and the flagship of this fundamental from bottom-up science. And it's not all, it couldn't be always, or shouldn't be always fundamental, but it has to be excellent. It has to be world-class, and everything what goes with it, with that. And the weakness actually is exactly the opposite. It's the huge pressure during the last 10 years or 15 years already in Europe to finance applied science instead of fundamental science. Just making confronting those two types of sciences. And this is not right, because the fundamental science is something which gives you a basis for solutions for day after tomorrow. But applied science today is something you are dealing with the problems which are here today. And this is something which is, you should not and never confront them. And this is very much at our national level, and I think also at the Commission, at the European level, we see that. If you compare the money what's put into the first pillar of the framework program with the second and the third one, then I think this is kind of weakness, because I'm not against the policy-driven science, absolutely not. This is very important as well, but then it should be also divided based on scientific excellence, because the policy or the industry can formulate the question what should be solved, but then the scientists, the world best scientists, which we have in Europe, they have to find a solution at the very modern, contemporary level solution. Thank you. Good. So basically, yeah. Confrontation of applied and fundamental science, these are the strengths and the weaknesses.
Probably we'll come back to this. Now, Jean-Pierre.
Well, I think what you said about Europe for the moment is still a part of the world where definitely freedom dominates, and therefore definitely people can, they don't always have the means, but at least they have the possibility of developing what they want to develop. So it's more a question of means rather than a question of being prevented from doing things. So this is a value which I think needs to be preserved, and well, I hope we continue like this. The weakness for me is really, it's a real paradox. The paradox is that the way, first of all, a figure that we should keep in mind, because it's not so well known, is that if you look at the percentage of the support to research and innovation between Europe and national countries is 10% European money and 90% countries. So it means that the bulk of support for research and innovation comes from the countries. That's a reality. You could hope that more is going to, I mean, the balance will be a bit changed, but it does not change for a long, long time. And so now my main concern is that the paradox I want to mention is the following one. A priori, since the European Commission has these framework programs, which are decided every 7 years, it looks like you are taking a reasonably long-term perspective. But actually, that was not the case, because a large part of the budget of the framework program, if I look at the last one, Pillar 1, for example, was 17% of the budget. So most of it was the other part. Part of it was innovation, which is, it was, I think, 20%, and the rest was the so-called Pillar 2, which is supposed to be really cooperative research. But this cooperative research was top-down, and with a decision made about this top-down made more or less 5 years ahead, which means then agility is lost. And actually, presently, with the Horizon Europe, the Pillar 2 is really suffering. They don't even spend the money they have, which is a bad sign. When at the same moment, if you take the example of ERC, we could fund many more people without diminishing the quality. So the paradox is that although there is a mechanism for a priori looking reasonably long-term, 7 years, you need to have many more activities at European level which are really bottom-up. And so it means increasing the budget of ERC, but also for the part which is collaborative, to really introduce in it a truly bottom-up part. So maybe you identify some priorities which are considered at society level as domain in which we need to invest, but the decision on how we spend money on these issues should come back with a bottom-up approach. And then you can improve your agility.
Thank you. So I noticed we have this kind of academic part here, and yes. So maybe we have a different take.
I'll do it much more shorter, and I looked at the numbers last night just to remind myself. If you look about the research excellence, US, and I believe the comparison was with Germany, it's roughly on par on research excellence comparing Germany to US. And now if you look at the economic output of the research, Germany is tenfold behind US. You mentioned that France's national debt is quite high, Estonia's national debt is increasing. So getting substantially more money into research, I don't think that is realistic with the defense challenges we have, with the medical challenges we have. So the economic output needs to increase in order to make research in the EU or in Europe needs to make more money. And the second issue is that the funding that we have is extremely fragmented. I mean, if I looked at the average monthly Horizon Europe project funding, monthly, it's about 11,000 to 13,000. And my background is biomedical research, so I don't think you can do meaningful biomedical research with 11,000 to 13,000 a month. So the little or more vast amount of money that we have, we spread it thinly, trying to make everybody happy. We need to start making tougher choices and ensure that the investment we make are not subcritical, because even if we increase that 13,000 to, let's say, 16 or 18,000, you still can't make meaningful biomedical research with 18,000 a month. It's just not possible to do.
Okay, so
fragmentation is a massive issue, I believe.
We have two weaknesses now identified.
But the research excellence is on par with the US, roughly, so.
Good. Katrin.
Yes, I actually very much agree that academic freedom is a strength of Europe. But it's also a weakness, I think, when it comes without a responsibility, social responsibility. And that's one of the things where we need to have some kind of change, that academic freedom shall not be taken, I don't know, as an entitlement. You know, this is our right to have. It comes with the responsibility. Otherwise, it's not financially sustainable, it's not politically sustainable. So if we can somehow make that shift, that yes, we need bottom-up research, we take it with full responsibility, it has to have some kind of effect, either, I don't know, on security, on social life, humanities, culture, whatever. It has to have some kind of impact.
Good. Mick?
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a pickle now because already a few topics have been mentioned that I also wanted to talk about. But yeah, again, if we maybe look at the numbers, if we are very frank, then actually I think that has been a strength for European science for a long time. Let's say, really the excellence is fading away because from research output, China is going ahead. If we look at top universities, then only a few universities are from Europe, mostly are from US, UK, and China. So we are losing that battle. I too agree on the academic freedom part, because again, if we look at the numbers, and last week we had quite a good, again, thing that we can say out loud, that we are second country in the world on academic freedom, Estonia, and most of the European Union countries were on the top. But if we look, again, as Katrin already mentioned, it's also the weakness, because if we look at countries that have very good innovation and industry policies, so US, UK, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, they were quite lower down in the table, but they actually have seen that if you want to have also the impact of this excellent science and research, you need to focus. And through innovation policy and industry policy, you can focus the research as well. So this is a challenge, I guess, for a whole Europe to resolve how to balance between the academic freedom and the industry policy.
Yeah, thank you. And your reactions very much prepare the ground for my next question, which is about what kind of science system does Europe want? And I would like to ask, should European science primarily be judged by excellence, by societal relevance, or by economic return? And can these three be balanced without weakening each other? And I think this kind of challenge we identified between academic freedom and competitiveness or economic return is already there. So maybe, Jean-Pierre, would you like to start?
Oh, well, in a sense, my response to this is, of course, I'm very comfortable with the three priorities that you put forward. I have no problem with that. But my reaction to that is what the RC has been doing, that is to leave the researcher take the initiative. And while I was the president of ERC, we could, for example, witness, for example, one issue in many countries in Europe is immigration, for example. If you look at the number of projects which were submitted concerning immigration at the initiative of researchers, not because we asked them, it was very significant. Same with a number of other issues which are identified of very high societal relevance. And so the belief that if you leave the researcher do, they will, in average, not take into account societal relevance, it's just not true. It doesn't mean that there are not some totally exotic things, but I think you never know that maybe one of the exotic things is going to produce something of real societal relevance, which you don't know. So leaving the initiative, the researchers, for me, has been in the case of ERC. And also what was fantastic was, I will give you one example, and if I need to be brief, because I liked it very much. And I saw the person who did that. So the person is, I can even give the name, is Elaine Chu. So she's a pianist, but she's also very interested in the impact of music on the body. And one thing she has been developing, and she actually gave a lecture at my institute recently, is how using the music you can have both diagnosis and therapeutics for the heart. Because if you monitor properly the impact of music on the heart, you actually can get information on the diagnostics that you don't have for the moment any other way of getting. And also, she also has looked into the therapeutics. So the idea that somebody who is a professional musician and a very concertist will end up contributing to medicine this way is not something you're going to plan. You need this kind of individual, and of course she produces evidence that it's the reality. It's not just her dream. So you see, that's my point. That is, let's let people take the initiative, and then hopefully we will be financing really things which actually will impact, will have societal relevance. The part about economic competitiveness is quite different, because definitely if you want to, and you are quite right in saying that you really want to have an impact, the amount of money which goes in typically into supporting research is not going to make the difference. So you're talking about another instrument which is needed. I think for the moment there is one at the European level, which is the European Innovation Council. And I cannot judge because I've been accompanying its birth, but now I'm not involved, so people should evaluate whether it's doing a good job or not such a good job. But I think because the order of magnitude of funds which make a difference is a different order, and therefore it's a different mechanism which will be relevant.
Maybe, Mari.
Yes, actually I absolutely agree everything what Jean-Pierre said, because I'm an ERC panelist. Since 2020 I just started, well this is my last year now because it's the 4th time, but anyway, I'm in the middle of evaluation at the moment. And I started first time in March, beginning of March 2020. You remember what happened then? I left Brussels from the first panel meeting, and the Brussels airport was empty. It was 12th of March 2020. And there was a huge discussion in ERC Council. At that time, it was just after you, and we had a very fancy new presidency there. And there was kind of pressure to the ERC Council from the presidency at that time that let's apply the new instrument to finance this COVID pandemic studies. And then fortunately, ERC Scientific Council fought against it. But afterwards, because the ERC grant, if the grant is already given, the grantee is free to change their focus in a way, not completely, and there were quite a few COVID pandemic-related studies which were initiated by the researchers themselves. So ERC grantees really helped to cope with the even social crisis there and studied that. So I think that the scientists don't have responsibility towards solutions what industry or world or society needs to deal with. It's a myth. This year, in the first round, I have 40 proposals to read. Every proposal started why this study is needed for the world. Not for me, but why this study is needed. So I think it's probably a fairy tale which goes around in political and maybe official circles. And I think the excellence is the only one what we should really evaluate at the scientific level. And it doesn't matter whether it's applied science or is it fundamental science, what I said. And again, what goes with business, this means that this is different money. It's completely different money. You can't really finance any research, like the first two or even 3 phases of the research in this way that the business can be done with that. This is the next step. And I think in Europe, we do have quite a lot of money in this framework program, but the framework program, Pillar 2, the current one, which is top to down, it's not designed in a proper way. Because there is the one who is asking to do something for us, it's political order or industrial order. This is not really working well. I have been really in these panels there as well, and I have been told by the officers how do you evaluate the scientific proposals, and this is not really, I can't say it's a waste of money, but it's not really working well. So basically...
I guess, yeah, maybe Mart and Mick will have a hopefully different perspective, especially in terms of economic return of research.
Yeah, so again, the economic return is absolutely needed. You need to increase economic return if you're lagging behind the US 10 times. But in addition to funding and funding instruments, maybe we don't think enough about how to actually reach that economic benefit. I mean, Enterprise Estonia sees a ton of great ideas for applied research. Technology is sound often, but the execution of the application often lags behind. So you don't have enough business development or regulatory expertise, etc. And the University of Tartu and probably TalTech are very well positioned to actually solve this problem. The University of Tartu teaches very good life sciences. I've graduated it myself. It teaches very good economics, and it teaches very good social sciences. And I had a chat last night with a friend, a good friend. She has held several global roles and has launched several successful businesses. And I told her that I need to come to this panel. I have nothing to say about the social science and how to actually apply this research and how to discuss it. I said, you should know. You should put together this team. They teach economics, research, social sciences, and you need social sciences to be able to succeed in the international business because it teaches you how to understand context, it teaches you how to be interesting around people, and if you are in a global business, you come up with, meet people with various backgrounds, so you need to understand the context, and this helps you. And so if you put this together in the University of Tartu, in TalTech, in Tallinn University, maybe the level of application or excellence in applying research to economy increases and well, everybody gets more money. The country gets more money, EU gets more money, and research gets more money as well.
Mick,
yeah, if I come back to your original question, then of course, yes, answer to all three is yes, and actually the public sector expects even more from the scientists. But I think every time we have this discussion, we think that the scientist is some kind of a supernatural being that can teach to excellent science, to communicate their scientific results to the wider public, to have a societal impact, and then start a company and also translate this science into business. But actually, what we would like to see is that we have different career pathways. So again, from my personal experience, from my PhD, I had 0 subjects that were related to some kind of economic studies or how to translate your research results into economic benefits. So I was taught how to write good publications, how to apply scientific methods, but really I didn't see any kind of different pathway. So I knew that after my PhD, I had to go to postdoc or 2 postdocs maybe, come back, then start a small research team, get a maybe starting grant, then already a larger grant. And there was any kind of, let's say, alternative to that. So I guess we really have to make this alternative career path very clear. And there we have already some very good support schemes. So again, ERC's proof of concept is one that is for those scientists that see that their scientific results could have economic benefit, or the whole EIC scheme where you start from pathfinder and then do transition to accelerator. So actually the support schemes are there, but I think that these career pathways are not that clear yet. So we really need to work on that.
Okay, good. Okay, let me broaden the whole discussion a bit. And already somebody mentioned that we are increasingly lagging behind in Europe, let's say, vis-a-vis of USA or China. And indeed, my question is, what kind of international cooperation should the EU pursue with major powers, such as indeed USA or China? And maybe we can come back to Estonia. What's the role of small countries in this international cooperation, such as Estonia? And maybe Lauri, I mean, there is, on the one hand, you have, of course, let's say, problems of scientific communication, but also you have long, delicate geopolitical issues that might hamper the cooperation, let's say, between, even nowadays, between Europe and USA. How do you see this? What are the perspectives?
I want to come back to those facts that although, you know, scientific excellence in Germany is kind of similar to the US, but let's say how it translates into production, there's a huge gap there. I suspect that there might be more to it than just very bad solutions in how one translates. It's some sort of also cultural choices about societies, for example, about how much do we want to work, how productive do we want to be. You know, that part of European culture was also the capacity to have this little siesta, and to some extent, we did work to have that siesta. So I want to map that it's not, lifestyle, you know, in the end, you know, if we would all only talk about productivity and let's be more productive, we should start finishing this conversation and get back to, you know, doing what we were doing on the drawing board. But I think that science, generally, it has always a local dimension. And by the way, so just like Mari, I have been also in the same way of ERC evaluator since 2020, and what has, you know, also this excellence principle means that somehow one doesn't look where does the excellent science money go. So what I see a lot is that you have people with, you know, Yugoslav or Polish or Hungarian names, but working from UK and the Netherlands, very rarely vice versa. It's very rarely that the person with French name would apply from a Hungarian university for an ERC grant. So there is a little bit this, you know, on the one hand, we want that European level science as a playing field, as a space. Probably people like us, we would actually want to imagine that at some point we might be employable by Paris or something. Whether it happens is another thing. But now geopolitically, I just feel that I did myself an attempt in the past to communicate also with Russian scholars of international law. All that has now been diminished seriously to the point where actually my university doesn't necessarily, or is really cautious about that kind of...
We have forbidden it since 2020
I know.
March.
Well, I can still write some email if I want to, right? It won't prohibit me that.
Well, no, it won't.
But so that is a factor. I don't know. I feel also when you raise this question, there will be a lot of nuance depending on whether the science involves some sort of technology transfer or is it some sort of social. Because in social sciences, this conversation is still ongoing. When I go to the United States, a conference, you know, some of these Russian scholars will actually be there, yes. And some of them, you know, But I think when social sciences, at least, there is always this ideological element as well. Different parts of the region, they might have different agendas, what they want from the future of the world, and in that sense, one needs to somehow, you know, take that into account with those conversations.
Still, science by nature is international.
Yeah, yes and no, I'd say. Yeah. But Jean-Pierre, do you have I mean, do you see a further cooperation between Europe and USA, and eventually China in coming years, or rather vice versa?
Well, there are two sides to this. Again, I mean, the one side, of course, is, and my first comment is that my feeling is that I don't people are measuring the damage which is being done in the US at the moment, because it's, of course, some domains are completely, I mean, really destroyed, and with the courses which are not could not be given. Even some people feel just to be able to survive as scientists, they have left, they have taken leave of absence for some time, so that courses can be given. So this is one thing. The other thing is, I think we, as scientists, we still need to cooperate on the individual basis with the people, because science is about exchanging with people, really, and progress. You can never know whether it's going to be there or there or there, because what makes a difference on people. So I think this is the two sides of the coin. That is, on one hand, definitely at some point, as I said, what really worries me is that now there are some people who feel that knowledge is bad, and therefore places and people who are producing knowledge are not good people, and that really frightened me a lot. On the other hand, we need to continue to have cooperation. And as for myself, in my career, I've been a lot to, and very early actually, to Asian countries, in particular to Japan, to China, to South Korea. And I've developed a number of collaboration. Actually, in École Polytechnique, I was for a long time really in charge of the Chinese students. And so I could see the quality of these students, extraordinary quality. And the fact now, a number of them, most of them, almost all of them have gone back. They have decided to go back. And what they are doing at the moment is, in my discipline, mathematics, is, I think I can easily say at the moment, China is number one country in the world, because of this new generation of people, because not only they are more, but I mean, the quality has been improving remarkably well. They work very hard, they have a good condition, they have very good students, and things are moving. So for me, cooperation is fundamental, which does mean we have to be naive, and that, of course, we know in the end, since people make a difference, if they are producing more people high quality in terms of competitiveness, we have a challenge. But one thing which is also interesting is, if now I'm coming to industry, actually for the first time in my life, I should have been doing that earlier, I visited the Airbus factory in Toulouse, and I spent 2 days there. And what I found really interesting is something I learned, which is, as you know, at the moment, Boeing is really in big trouble. And it looks like the big trouble comes from the fact that at some point they decided to give up on non-American engineers. And of course, it doesn't mean that Americans are not able to produce planes, but if you suppress this dynamic that you create in teams, and from that point of view, I think Airbus has been fantastically successful, partly because we're able to mix different approaches, different cultures, and so on. And of course, at the moment, the big challenge of Airbus is the fact that they have to produce 7,000 planes by 2032, and producing 7,000 planes is industrially an incredible challenge. And therefore getting the right people to do it, and so on and so forth. But still not being obsessed by the production of the present models, but to prepare for the next models, which will have to be more economical and so on. Okay. And it's just a random coincidence. I'm at the moment involved in a project between Netherlands and France about sustainable aviation, which is a very interesting challenge. I mean, and perspective are, I mean, you really have to be truly creative about developing new types of plane, new ways of having them, I mean, able to do their job and so on. So I think cooperation is absolutely indispensable. In Europe, at industrial level, at least Airbus is a good example that we have been successful. There are also, of course, if you look at AI, the situation is quite different because the difference in size of the major contributor are quite so substantial between the US and the rest, and also the part which we don't see completely, which is China, which is also moving fantastic.
I can only rely, hopefully, on France on this. But I will hand it over to Katrin.
Yes, I very much agree that when collaborating with the US these days, you cannot be naive. And I think Europe has very much been built on the premises that cooperation is good. Collaboration in research is especially good. You know, research is international by nature. But what you mentioned earlier, what kind of research we need to have economic growth, to solve our societal problems. In recent years, we have another issue, which is security, strategic autonomy. All those really strategic technologies like AI or quantum or pharmaceutical technologies, whatever, we very much in Europe depend on US or China these days. And considering this geopolitical shift in the Europe, in the world, the matter that US takes also the research collaboration very much transactional and unpredictable occasionally. So we need to become more independent technologically from US as well, which is an entirely new topic, and which also raises a question, what kind of research we need to become technologically independent from the US corporations in AI, in other technologies, and how much time does it take if we start with the research now? So it's entirely new question, but what kind of research? We still need collaboration, obviously. We need not to be naive, not to become more vulnerable, more dependable, and it's not very easy. There are no easy solutions. What small countries can do, I think small countries identify risks and opportunities much more earlier than large countries. In my experience, maybe we are not heard often, but we do. So in that sense, I think the small countries in Europe, and Nordic Baltic countries are all small countries in Europe, are very good test bed in that sense, that to identify where the risks and opportunities are.
Yes, Mart. Well, maybe I agree with you 100% what you said. The EU has been a bit naive so far, and you're right, we have new challenges. Business Finland, which is an equivalent of Enterprise Estonia in Finland, did a foresight exercise on that matter, and they identified 4 scenarios. One, the most optimistic one, was that everybody is one big happy family and collaborates freely. The most red or critical or negative scenario was that each country on its own, but the most probable is that the world is divided into regions. China, US, and EU each are separate regions with minimal interaction between each other. But regardless of which scenario comes to fruition, you need to increase strategic autonomy. I mean, I visited company Silmet a number of times, and I remember one presentation from a few years back that when China essentially pushed a button and put export bans on certain critical materials, the prices through the roof immediately. So we rely so heavily on China that we need to be less naive, maybe keep the siesta a bit shorter and increase our strategic autonomy, because otherwise I don't think it is possible to live as happily and be as rich as we are currently. Yeah. I don't think that's possible.
This is probably the gist of the problem, how to be cooperative and open at the age of strategic autonomy. And
I don't think you can be fully open in this case.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have many more questions, but I would like to now open it up to the audience. I know Mart already want to intervene, Margit as well. So yeah, raise your hand if you want and wait for the mic. So Mart, over to you.
Thank you. So I see several fundamental differences between US and Europe. And one is, I give you an example. So we discovered in 1996 a growth factor receptor, published 2 papers in Nature, obviously had clinical potential. In 1 week, 10 US pharmaceutical companies contacted me and offered contracts. Among them was 0 European company. Mm-hmm. They never, ever contacted me. I finally made a contract with US company. It repeated 10 years later. We discovered a new growth factor. Again, now not 10, but 5 US companies contacted. Not a single European company was interested. Again, it ended up with a contract. Plus they didn't, I didn't work for the company. They supported my fundamental research because this fundamental research, how this thing worked, was essential for their drug development. The second point here is that if you go to leading scientific conferences, biomedical conferences, you don't see European companies there. They are not there. American companies are there. They ask questions, they invite you for the dinner, they try to squeeze out from you data. I don't know where our guys are. Probably playing billiard or I don't know. Then the second, I think the most fundamental question, in my opinion, is that in large, and that concerns Estonia, Scandinavia, perhaps also France, the industry in Europe is not giving monetary value to ideas. I give you again an example. In 2002, we started a company in Finland, and we wanted investment, and the investors said that we were two scientists. You guys know nothing about business. You should have a third partner who knows something about business. So we took the guy who actually runs Saarma. He really knows something about business. And when we started to set up the company, we thought that we give him maybe 10, maybe 20% of the shares. He said, no, we should have equal. He brought nothing. We both brought everything. And then 10 years later, I made a company with a US guy. He put 5 million. I and Matti Karlsson, another Estonian guy, we bought only ideas, and we shared the company equally. That's a different. The American guys valued our ideas for $5 million. And this repeats and repeats and repeats in Estonia, Finland, Sweden, etc. There is a slight difference in Denmark. And European scientists are also socially very, very inactive. We didn't open our mouth when GMO was forbidden. We didn't open our mouth when CRISPR-Cas was qualified as a GMO, which all inhibits science and technology development.
Thank you. We'll take it as a comment and hand it over to...
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting panel. I was just wondering how much we are actually taking context into consideration, because if we are comparing, for example, I don't know, Europe with the US or China, have we also thought actually how much funding is going there in basic research? I mean, especially the gentleman from the ministries actually. I mean, would this help when we actually only put our money in applied science? I mean, if we don't put it in basic funding, I very much agree with Mari Mora actually. If we don't put, there will be no output. I think this is one thing. I mean, the budget of Harvard University is can be compared to the Estonian budget, the budget of the whole state. If we are going actually to avoid fragmentation, as you were suggesting, this would mean we put everything on the one card. And is this correct? Because we did not know that pharmaceutical things, vaccines are so important. I mean, we would not have known it 10 or 20 years ago. My colleague Toivo Maimet says it's good that we funded this kind of research because when the COVID problem came, we were able actually to interpret the results, to find the right solutions. I think this is actually not foreseeable. Nobody can really know. And I have been also evaluating like all these biotech knowledges, tragedies for starting when our genome project started. 20 years ago, everybody wanted to have biotech, actually. I mean, it's not realistic that everybody in the world is making success when everybody thinks this is the card where we put our own all money. So I think this is very, I would be very suspicious in this sense. And just my question actually really is, what is a clever thing to do for Estonia? Because we have also our national interests. I mean, on the one hand, this is true, But would this mean that we actually fund only research that is for national funding? Or is it really that we have this curiosity-based research? But perhaps also leading our keynote speaker, the right thing to do is in education to actually educate people so that they can actually phrase a correct scientific, a good scientific question. Because then it will also lead to some kind of innovation or be like basic funding that is one day very useful. When I am teaching, actually, I'm teaching ethics courses, research ethics to all the faculties in Tartu University because the students all need it. I think a major problem is that the doctoral student can't say why is actually this research question important, why the topic is, and it's not only why it has a societal value, but it's more like why is it an interesting scientific question? And we see exactly the same problem when the ministries are funding applied research. I mean, they can say that, okay, the Ministry of Agriculture says that all the fishes must be counted. I mean, why? Why do you not need to know how many churches there are or why, or how many actually problems there are? I think this is the value, the research question, how you find a new and really good research question, then you can actually get a good result, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it's the same with AI now, how to write a good prompt. And then we need philosophy, because philosophy is good in raising a question. Thank you very much.
Do we have any more comments, questions? Then we can address them all together. As you can see, anyhow, we are running out of time, but do you want to react to some of the points raised? Yeah, Mari?
I would like to say, because I mean, when you briefed us in advance, and it was also asked by you from Jean-Pierre, what about social sciences and humanities nowadays? And actually, I'm a natural scientist myself, but because I'm a vice rector for research of the only comprehensive university in Estonia, which has almost all the subjects which are taught and studied in Estonia. I would have a comment on that, but Margit said that what is very important to really teach your students or people to think and to understand and to ask the right questions. But what about social sciences and humanities? I would like to refer to one of my colleagues. He is a recent professor in social sciences. I can't really spell out his professorship name because it's very complicated. But if I tell your name, Laur Kanger, Estonians know...
Transition studies, professor.
Let's say transition studies, and it's completely social sciences and let's say even humanities in a way. And he's a ERC grantee. He is at the moment running Consolidated grant in that. And I must say that his study and his research is something which is extremely important nowadays, because what he's studying is how naive we are if we think that the new technologies will solve all our future problems. And I mean, he's studying and showing it based on history, that when the electricity came and so on and so on. So I mean that if we want to understand what technology does for the society, for the business, whatever, then we need to study humanities. Human nature, human relationships, and everything, all kinds of interaction networks which are behind of the languages and also cultures. Otherwise, we can't really evaluate or even estimate the impact to the society.
That's a very good message, and I think Katrin will agree.
Yes, yes, indeed. I love this Harvard example. I think it's a favorite example of all researchers. Of course, if we had that kind of funding, what kind of amazing research we could do. But I think Harvard is an excellent example of US strength, having economic impact, because a large part of Harvard budget is private, and having a very big societal impact, because a large part comes from different sources, starting from, I don't know, space and and health and other sources. So in fact, I think we can ask either way. Could we have a budget of Harvard and then we will do amazing things? Or could we maybe start with having some baby steps in impact? You know, making it actually very clear what kind of impact our research has on society, on economy. And then I think the funding will come. The problem, the difference, as I think Professor Saarma very clearly showed us between US and Europe is actually whether the companies notice breakthrough research and whether they actually want and know how to monetize it. And that's not something that will come forth on its own. We all have a part in it. You know, how to make it happen that we have that kind of companies in Europe, in Estonia, that actually come and say, Margit, here is your grant, do philosophy. You know, and that's, you know, a cutting edge already. You know, we probably start with applied research, and the next step is to have actually basic research, also funded by the private sector.
But if you don't have basic research, you can't apply anything.
True.
But it's never absolute, right? It's not like, let's put every euro we have into applied research or experimental development. It's always a game of ratios, right?
Absolutely.
Nobody's suggesting that you should ban all fundamental research and never fund it again. It's just that society needs some real-world applications through applied research. And again, looking at the numbers, I don't think we can increase the research funding, public sector research funding, substantially. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's possible in Europe as a whole, specifically.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the same thing, that if we start to debate on applied research, fundamental research, and take only into account state budget, then this discussion will go nowhere. Yeah. So as already Katrin also mentioned, that actually we need to really get the private sector in investing in R&D in Europe as well. So the main difference between Europe and US is that there is like the same amount of public funding for research and innovation, but 10 times more private funding. So how we get even our pension funds go to US to invest in US companies. So how we can create a similar environment in Europe, that we have companies that can take risks, can really invest in new innovation, and that's the thing we should really look into, not debate on whether X% goes to fundamental research or Y% goes to applied research, because that won't take us anywhere.
I do agree, and I think this is particularly true also for Estonia, because I think in Europe, especially Northern Europe, you have plenty of examples of companies investing into both applied and fundamental research. But in Estonia, as we know, there is almost none. And that's why I'm very glad that actually Mart Saarma and the Academy of Science is trying actually to launch some kind of private funding for research and innovation. But you wanted to...
So you said about Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
Its endowment is currently about 60 billion. Yale 45, MIT 30, which means that if they invest that and they do that, Harvard gets every year from 5 to 7 billion euros extra to be used. So that gives them total independence. They can do for that money if they want. They drink whiskey, if they want, they do experiments. They really have freedom. We should think about that, because this is actually a key to independence. We are very, very dependent on politicians.
Public money.
Public money, yeah. Okay, but I still feel that we risk to losing our audience. And but we started 10 minutes later, and we will end 10 minutes later, so everything is very fine. So I think just this is maybe the right moment to say thank you.
Thank you.
And especially thank you for our special guest, Jean-Pierre. And indeed, let's enjoy the academic freedom and try to find some private money.
Yeah.
Sure, whatever money.
Whatever. Yes.
Let's try to find money.